Okay, so Rise is coming out this Wednesday on PC, giving us a much needed, much welcome upgrade over the Switch version. Is it worth the upgrade? Is it worth picking up at all? Now, we'll be looking at that and more with this in-depth look at Monster Hunter Rise on the PC. First of all, thanks Capcom for giving me this review code. It is very much appreciated. Getting it to me early is going to let me really go in-depth to all of the changes and additions to this. That being said, this is my full uninfluenced opinion, so don't think because I got the code early that I'm giving this high or negative points either way. Okay, with that out of the way, how does the game look? Obviously, going from the Switch, a nearly 7-year-old tablet that can just barely keep the game at 30 FPS to modern PC gaming, it's clear to see that the game is going to look way, way better. Whereas, you had, around 720 fluctuating resolution. Now you can have probably up to about 4K with a lot of people maybe even hitting 120 FPS. The RE engine really does a lot of work here. Very optimized engine, allows for really great performance. But it's clear a lot of that goes a long way based on the optimizations that were made for the Switch engine itself. This shows up from time to time. Going to show a little artifacting here. I don't know quite what's going on. When you wander around in an area, you get this little sphere of influence around you where kind of like a dithering or shadowing pops in. As good as the high resolution textures do look, it's also very clear that the environment was designed for a Switch and not a PC. Just compared it head-to-head to World and basically any area, you can see that while the world is large, with a lot of verticality in it, there's just not nearly as much detail as somebody who maybe had World as their first game would expect. It is a simple and clean appearance that in some scenes really stands out in a really positive way. Added exclusively to the PC version is this new graphical filter, hidden a little bit in the advanced settings. In World, I used a lot of tools like Reshade to try and change color and contrast, so it's nice to see that Capcom is providing us that feature directly. Playing around with it, I can see some people using it when making screenshots, but even the most interesting Warring States filter doesn't really look like the sort of thing I'd want to play with. It adds some interesting color highlights, but then arbitrarily desaturates other things? I don't know. Could be fun to play around with. I'd like to see something that goes on full-on cell shading, something like Monster Hunter Stories 2, or maybe something that really blows the contrast out with a lot of vibrancy. As is, nice feature to have. Going to be really fun for people that want to take screenshots. Otherwise, I'm not sure it's necessarily a game-selling feature. This may go without saying, the ability to use virtually any controller in PC will be a pretty big advantage as well. The Switch was definitely a little bit more open than Xbox or PS5 in this regard, with a lot of third-party controllers working natively, but PC with the Steam layer will work with basically anything. Capcom has taken note, and included under the game settings are controller button icons for Xbox 360, Xbox One and Series, PS4, PS5, and the Nintendo Switch. Keyboard and mouse feel as good as ever. Not much to say here. It looks like it works. It seems like it's a real mouse input layer, and it's not just emulating an analog stick. Not my preferred way to play Monster Hunter, but if you liked it before, you should have no problem with it now. Probably the biggest downside compared to the Switch, though, is there's no native gyro controls. I made a whole video detailing this. I'll throw it down in the description if you want to check it out. But the way the Switch made gyro aiming so seamless kind of made me a fan of it. I mean, I think most of us remember motion controls as like Wii Music or whatever. Or, tilt controls for Mario Kart. But, while it's inconsequential for most weapons, when you use it with the bow, I think it really clicked on the Switch. Can't really blame Capcom. Very few Steam games natively support gyro as of right now. I'm sure some fans will come up with some Steam controller profiles that will work to some extent with being able to mimic the gyro with mouse. But it'd be really great if Capcom could look into taking full advantage of native gyro on, I believe, the PS4, PS5, and Switch Pro controllers in a future update. For actual in-game content, those of you starting on PC for the first time will benefit greatly. Rise was pretty controversial at launch. A lot of players dropped the game very early on the Switch because they burned through the 1.0 content basically immediately and felt like it wasn't worth sticking around for. To me, and especially if you were a completionist, I thought there was plenty to do in 1.0, at least assuming you played all the weapons and then especially if you were coping super hard trying to make Elemental work. That being said, Rise on PC launches with the 3.1 patch, which means it gets 2 significant title updates. Not really sure what the point 1 added, but I do know there is a real lot of event quests to go through. It's going to be a little bit behind the Switch. Just briefly, it's going from the content from the November update. Rise on the Switch has a little bit more to do, but I think they're going to be up to date sometime in February. To me, this is actually a good thing. It's going to give us the best possible release schedule. When it drops, there's going to be a ton to do. And then over the coming weeks, there'll be a little bit of a drip feed of new emergency quests, which are way harder than normal monsters. And then who knows, maybe they'll even throw us a bone and give us another mini title update with some new layered gear or equipment as well. So, good compromise overall. So in the end, is Rise worth the upgrade over the Switch? I mean, to me, unless you spend a ton of time on the go, or you're just a complete bow gyro diehard, there's really no questions. I mean, the graphical updates alone are worth it. The game runs basically perfectly with even faster loading speeds than you could ever hope for on the Switch. By the way, if you do play on the Switch, make sure you install the system NAND, not SD card. Just a little bit faster there. Future updates and graphical filters, control options, overall better performance. I mean, this is the version that I'm going to be playing and going to be going through Sunbreak when I go through for the first time. All right, with the version differences out of the way, I kind of want to get into some high-level praises as well as a couple nitpicks of Rise as a Monster Hunter title. So, one thing that's always been true of the Monster Hunter teams is they're always working to push this hunting genre forward. There's a lot of people out there that would be really happy if they just continually remade World, or 4U, or Portable Third, or Freedom Unite, but it seems pretty clear the teams themselves aren't satisfied to just jam new monsters into a shiny engine and keep everything else the same. So, with Rise, it may as well be synonymous with wire bugs, as basically the entire game and many of the game mechanics are now influenced by them in some way. So I showed off earlier, despite being made for the Switch, the maps for Rise are now extremely vertical, so even more so than 4 and 4U, which introduced hopping off of ledges and mounting monsters. There's a lot of verticality here. Between your own wire bugs, between great wire bugs, you're going to constantly find yourself slingshotting up and around mountainsides, flipping through the air, and basically doing Spider-Man moves everywhere. It can feel a little awkward at first, especially when you try and figure out what you actually have to do in order to climb up the mountainside. Especially seems a little bit strange for Monster Hunter, which for the most part has always had kind of like slow, methodical, stiff movement. It will definitely change the way you look and play other action RPGs. Beware if you play Genshin Impact and this is going to be your first time playing Monster Hunter Rise, that might be a difficult game to keep playing. Having to summon out a specific guy to set up a platform to slowly go up versus just wire bugging your way up. If you have any experience in Monster Hunter Generations or Generations Ultimate, you'll no doubt be familiar with Hunter Arts. These are moves that would charge up in various ways, generally through hitting the monster, but sometimes getting hit yourself, performing an evasion, certain items would restore your Hunter Art gauges. I played a lot of GU, and my feelings on it, for the most part, was a little bit negative. I felt like the Hunter Arts in a lot of ways cheapened the battle experience. I felt like I was constantly given 3 more or less instant evade, get out of jail free cards, and to me that took a lot of the tension out of the fight. And I was pretty happy when they didn't come back to Monster Hunter World, although I guess Monster Hunter World did give us the Rocksteady and Temporal Mantle, which I guess is his own individual little bag of worms. Rise takes a little bit more of a thoughtful approach. So your wire bugs are constantly recharging, and they're used for a lot of things. So they're used for your movement, they're used to recover from when you're attacked. They're, of course, used for these wire bug moves as well. And the moves themselves don't feel quite as powerful as they were in Generations Ultimate. I can't go through all of them, but they're basically attacks, counters, assistance, or sometimes some sort of a combination therein. Depending on the wire bug ability, they'll either be 1 or 2 charges, and then also depending on the wire bug ability, it will determine how long it takes for those wire bugs that were used to recharge. You can pick up a 3rd wire bug on the map for a little bit of a temporary boost, and you can even equip an armor skill that will affect, how long that 3rd wire bug lasts or how quickly they recharge as well. For some weapons, like the sword and shield, you get these wire bug moves like the Shoryugeki that really make the weapon a lot more fun than it would be without it. Basically, any of these counter moves make the weapons feel way, way better. Other weapons like the hammer, you feel like the wirebug skill is just like where all of your damage is. And when you're using your normal combos, it just kind of feels like you're tickling the monster. Every weapon has a more or less completely usable moveset outside of their wirebugs, except maybe longsword. But I do hope that Sunbreak will re-examine the weapon flow and balance in a way that kind of makes these wirebugs moves feel a little bit more like situational niceties more than things that you're going to be more or less spamming on cooldown. I did just touch on wirefall recovery a little bit, and it is a mechanic that will kind of sort of force you to not spam wirebug moves over and over. In previous titles, if you took a hit, you would spend some time rolling around on the ground, and in some titles, it would let you stand up automatically. Other titles, it would let you delay your stand up to have recovery. Rise changes this so that you can immediately cancel going through your getting hit animation by doing a mid-air recovery, shooting yourself out of the recovery with a little wirebug. As you would imagine, this dramatically increases the speed of combat, and in a way, it will lead many of us to start making some more bad habits because you'll say, well, I'll just take this trade risk anyways, I'll just wirebug recovery out of it. On its own, this might have been okay, but concurrent to this change was also a pretty big boost to healing. Max potions are still here and as powerful as ever, but even mega potions provide an immediate boost to your healing. For me, a better balancing mechanic would have been making the wirefall recovery one of the slower or longer recovery types, as that way you'd only really want to recover to avoid, again, the combos or maybe to get out of the way of a emergency tier monster. I'm not sure that nerfing Mega Potions is necessary because we would have all just used Max Potion IV Drip, but it's definitely starting to get to the point where it feels like it's just a hit or do not get hit sort of game. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Wyvern Riding. It's very clear that it's an extremely powerful mechanic. Videos have been made showing people nearly killing a monster through Wyvern Riding entirely on its own. Definitely overpowered. To me, this would make a little bit more sense if the only way you could get a Wyvern Ride off was the same way as if you were hitting with wirefall moves against your normal target monster, even non-target monsters. I also think monsters should probably not be able to cause Wyvern Rides on each other. It kind of takes the invading monster aspect to it and makes it more of a bonus than something that would normally be scary. So, feels a little bit strange. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds for the in-game, other than saying it needs a little bit of work. You see this cat? You see this guy a lot. And a lot of the endgame revolves around just funneling monster parts into him and managing something of a mental spreadsheet of what charms you have and what charms that you want to meld away or just sell because you don't even want them to go in your equipment box. Why aren't charms just a natural reward for clearing a quest is your guess as good as it is mine. But I'd be shocked if this doesn't end up being the case in Sunbreak, along with possibly random decorations there as well. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of good old-fashioned hunting for rare materials in this game. Without investigations, you actually have to work for parts now, a lot more so than you did back in World. There's no gold or celestial tickets or really any other shortcut, which I guess have been in the series since, at least Freedom Unite. So, interesting oddity to be gone from the game, but an interesting one because it actually does require you to do a bit more farming on your own. Despite all this criticism, I think Rise would have been extremely welcome, if not outright praised, were it not for this very last point. So, you remember in World where it seemed like every month or every other month there was either a new monster or a new festival or an event with a new weapon or a new layered weapon? It's been almost a year and that just didn't happen. There's a handful of things, but I think in this case, the picture will speak louder than words. For the record, I don't mind if there are extras sold in a storefront. You know, it's a great way to justify the time for artists and playtesters to make sure it looks good and works properly in the game. However, I'd say if you want players to be active and involved in a storefront, you need to keep them invested in the game. And as is, you know, most players, when you're playing these event quests, are getting titles, stickers, emotes. I mean, none of these are bad on their own, but it's over $100 of paid DLC with really almost no layered endgame gear through in-game events. I want to end on a positive because I know some of these final points have been a little bit negative. In spite of these shortcomings, Rise is an extremely fun game to play. Both new and returning monsters feel tuned in such a way that it feels as much a classic hunting experience as possible, despite the myriad of new systems. You'll feel as rewarded as ever for landing your counters, of which I said there are many, and hitting weak spots to get a tapple never gets old. The emergency monsters and the fact that Yoshitake Suzuki, the father of Demo Magnum Malo, will be the director for Sunbreak has me really optimistic that the next expansion could be one of the most challenging yet. While Rise may not give you over 1,000 hours of playtime, it'll at least give you a several hundred, and it'll be time well spent, and it'll put you in a great position to explore everything there is in the expansion that comes out this summer. Anything else that you want to see tested or tried out in the PC before it comes out this Wednesday? Let me know down in the comments below. Otherwise, check me out, twitch.tv/SDShepherd. I'll be starting streams every day for the next 2 weeks at 10 a.m., and I hope to see you over there soon. Until next time, good luck, and have a good hunt.